I'm Patrick Heffernan from Technology Business Research, and we're taking a look through these roundtables. This is the fourth one at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic across the IT services and professional services sector, looking at what the impact is on the vendors, on the businesses as a whole, on their clients. And today I'm joined by my colleagues Elitsa, Bakalova, and Hristov. And for this roundtable, we're going to talk first kind of specifically about what's happening in the IT services space with the IT services vendors. Elitsa will talk to that. And then Boz will talk more broadly about what's happening with digital transformation and where we see those trends going now and into the rest of this year. So with that, I'll hand it over to Elitsa.
Thank you, Patrick. Before we dive into what's going on now, I want to just do a quick summary of how we wrapped up 2019 for the 29 vendors that we cover in our IT services benchmark. So for 2019, we ended with 2.2 year-to-year revenue growth collectively for the vendors, which has been a trend. That low single digits trend has been going on for the full year, and it's a bit slower than what the vendors reported the year ago when we had a 6% year-to-year growth in revenues. And there are several reasons for that. We still see challenges around commoditization and revenue declines in traditional IT services areas, even though vendors are shifting their portfolios over the past year to be more driven by next generation solutions like cloud and cybersecurity and edge computing, quantum computing. But still, for many of the vendors, a large share of their revenues are driven by traditional IT services, which has been a challenge for them. There were some unfavorable market dynamics around specific segments such as financial services and tight spending towards the end of the year that pressured growth and caused that low single digit revenue growth for 2019 for some of the vendors. And now we move into the new year, 2020, when we have a new negative factor that's impacting literally every industry, including the IT services industry, and that's COVID-19. So there have been a lot of changes in the way businesses operate, including IT services firms. And it's been a great hurdle over the past month or so and going into 2Q20, where vendors have had to quickly adjust their operating models to a new work environment. They had to change to a work from home or organizational structure so they can still deliver services to clients. They had to stop traveling and visiting clients on site to deliver their consulting and implementation activities. And those changes are going to be affecting IT services performance in terms of delivery. So looking into the way things shape up for 2020, it's not only the health related issues that people as human beings are experiencing, but it's also the way that IT services work is delivered. Decreasing efficiency and service quality could be a challenge because of having a remote workforce and vendors not being able to control quality and utilization of their people. We can have delays in service delivery due to inability to travel and to deliver on-site activities. There can be postponed spending just overall for projects or for deals because of the uncertainty that we're experiencing now in terms of macroeconomic environment. So we'll see many clients taking a hold in spending on IT services. So that could, inevitably cause a challenge in growth performance for the vendors. And while we have just started to record and track 1Q20 earnings for the vendors, I think the really big impact will start into Q20 because COVID-19 and the country lockdown started in end of March. During the March timeframe. So it really won't affect as much performance in 1Q20. But for the next quarter, we'll definitely see challenges in revenue growth. And specifically, the areas I think that will get the highest impact is consulting and systems integration activities, which are very much tied to discretionary spending and tied to on-site collaboration and work with the clients. So vendors will have to adapt their models in terms of delivering virtual consulting services. So that would definitely shift performance in the consulting and systems integration space, which was a growing service line in 2019, but will likely see a decelerating growth, maybe even some negative growth trends in 2020. Really depends how powerful and impactful is the COVID-19 on the overall market environment, and how long that challenge will persist in the coming months. I think a trend that will still remain for the vendors going forward, that was really prevalent in 2019, is the development of vendors' portfolios around next generation solutions. So those investments in acquisitions and in alliances around cloud, cybersecurity, blockchain, IoT, all the new digital solutions would still remain. I think that emphasis to change the mix in the portfolio around next generation solutions and to train and reskill employees to be able to deliver those solutions, that won't disappear. That still will remain, and it will be important going forward because of the new environment. For example, in infrastructure work, I think cloud and security will be two key areas where vendors will see opportunities to expand even more in 2020 compared to 2019. For example, because now we have increases in workforce mobility due to COVID and the need for people to work from home. So that will drive up activities around managed security services. Cloud will remain a growth area and will increase adoption because it's something that will be necessary for clients to be able to continue to save costs, to cut costs, and and for vendors, if they're not able to deliver on-site activities related to infrastructure, clients will start looking for virtualized and remote environments, which cloud provides for clients. So I think those two areas are good examples of how things will progress in the infrastructure environment. On the business services side, activities related to BPO will definitely see a rise in automation, even more than it was in 2019. So those models around automation-enabled delivery and platform solutions, they will continue to progress in 2020. And, it will really depend on the service delivery that's tied to remote working and in-country infrastructures that are well established to handle high-quality teleworking and increased internet use, so that delivery from nearshore and offshore locations are not interrupted and they're efficient, and they can continue providing the support for global clients. With this, I want to wrap it up and open it for Boz, who will cover our digital DTI research.
Yes, thank you, Elitsa. And I kind of take that last point Elitsa made from the client's point of view a little bit. I'll kind of zoom in on what we see and what we believe some of the changes that will occur as a result of COVID-19 across the digital transformation spectrum. provide some insights where the buyers were end of 2019, entering 2020, and where we think we see some of the major changes occur for the vendors themselves and how they need to realign their own go-to-market strategies and portfolios. So just to kind of start a little quick overview, well, we wrapped up our Voice of the Customer research at the end of 2019. We surveyed enterprise executives across Americas, Europe, and APAC. And we're trying to get a better sense of where they were on their digital transformation spectrum. And we do have 4 different phases, from legacy, substitution, extension, and transformation. And we've been doing that research for the last couple of years. That we've been looking at how the buyers are actually moving across those phases and how actually they are changing their spend habits. And what was inevitable in 2019 was that many more buyers were ready to embark on full digital transformation comparing to a year ago. And they were ready to spend beyond just the substitution, beyond the extension phase, and really looking into embarking on full digital transformation programs. We saw that trend, and when we kind of pushed back a little bit more on the conversations that we had directly with some of those buyers, was there's a lot of more of those next generation technologies that were coming around, and as Elitsa mentioned, that have been impacting some of the performance of the IT services vendors. It was about how those buyers are changing their sentiment towards investing in those technologies, and kind of almost like creating an urgency within their own organizations to ensure the long-term existence of their business. So that kind of helped to drive opportunities, helped to drive growth across consulting and systems integration services for vendors, as well as long-tail managed services. So the full digital transformation programs were certainly up for ripe. They were trying to get in and move at scale. I think the time of proof of concept workshops have passed, and it's really about scaling and addressing actually the business outcome needs. And we're looking into the various programs, from IT operations through CX, through HR, supply chain optimization. So we're trying to gauge of like where those priorities were when it came down to digital transformation spend. But the bottom line was that the buyers were certainly ready to spend on and embark on full digital transformation phases. So that was end of 2019. As we entered 2020, 1Q20, as Elitsa pointed out, the results were still kind of like okay, to say the least, in sense of like how it progressed through January and February. As March started to kick in, we started seeing some early indication of some of those digital transformation priorities starting to change. And it's more, not so much as like that if buyers are to be, should they be doing digital transformation projects, but changing priorities, like which digital transformation projects are now coming to play. And certain buyers are still kind of in the evaluation phase and trying to understand what's going to be their priorities for the next 6 months or a year before they start pulling the trigger on those projects. But some of the initial preliminary conversations we have had and observations is that there are 2 main areas that, not surprised, that will capture the initial spend around digital transformation from a buyer's and vendor's point of view. One is HR transformation, improving the employee experience, as well as cybersecurity. And cyber is more like a horizontal area where kind of cuts across the entire organization. But this is where we expect most of the next 6 months DT, kind of digital transformation spend, to go after. And that's where we see some of the opportunities for vendors to have the skills to be able to address those opportunities for digital transformation. Security is certainly an area that it's nothing new, but as Elitsa pointed out, there'll be some new pockets of opportunities, especially as we think about the increase in remote workforce and trying to manage an infrastructure and software layers, especially with a lot of mission critical applications that now will be highly leveraged in a cloud-based and remote-based environment. So buyers are almost in a standby, but also looking into what's the immediate mission critical. And that's what's important to think about, how vendors should think about and reacting to where they should almost kind of remobilize their own resources and see where they should be putting their efforts, at least in the next 6 months for digital transformation projects. Knowing that once things quote unquote go to back to some sort of normal, the digital transformation programs will continue in certain pace. It will be interesting to see when we do the conversations with some of the enterprise buyers for the June iteration of the report, Voice of the Customer report, and more importantly in December when we're publishing, who's kind of give us a little more of a year view and observation how buyers are changing their sentiment. But as I said, those are some of the preliminary expectations and changes of sentiment from the buyer's point of view. Now, Elitsa mentioned partnerships. I think that's another angle that we need to emphasize. That's important to know and to think about when it comes to digital transformation project execution. COVID-19 certainly will not be the sole variable that will impact how partnerships are structured, executed, and go to market and delivered projects with, but certainly will force and compel some of the vendors to make some adjustments. We have started seeing and observing that trend around changing how the services and technology vendors go to market together pretty much over the last 6 to 9 months. And we've written some reports around and just actually published a report on as part of the digital transformation research cross-vendor report where we looked at SAP and a couple of their systems integration partners and how the relationship is evolving and trying to see what are the changes, what are the expectations, and how actually the buyers are reacting to some of those changes as well. So for around partnerships, I think it will be very, very important to really amplify the value of what the services and technology partners bring in together, which will be very challenging to manage, especially in a remote setting. But this is where the true exclusivity around partnerships will shine and make it really work for the buyers that are ready to pull the trigger on certain digital transformation projects. So in a sense, as Elitsa mentioned, buyers are kind of in a standby, but also pulling the trigger mode in certain pockets, so kind of changing the priorities for buyers. Partnerships and managing with between services vendors and technology vendors is an important aspect that we believe will evolve. Actually will become a little bit more of our expectations, what we have been calling out for the last 6 to 9 months, where exclusivity around certain partnerships is important, but also important to develop a kind of a checks and balance and separation of powers mindset between services and technology parts, because that's what buyers are expecting, knowing who does what and when. And that's where I think will prove really shine on during the COVID-19 and beyond, actually, as well as talent management. As Elitsa pointed out, that's certainly an aspect that will be important, because a lot of those organizations, as they think about where the opportunities are with an HR transformation for employee experience, many of those large organizations have to also adjust their own internal organizations, so that could provide a good use case for them to apply some of the lessons learned to their own clients as well, leveraging a lot of the technologies that Elitsa mentioned, like cloud and AI, as tools to be able to enable them to really address some of the challenges that their clients are facing and going through during COVID-19. So interesting time, to say the least, but digital transformation, we don't see it stalling at scale, but more changing priorities. That's I think the key part that I want to emphasize here as we think about what the new normal would be post COVID-19. And with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Thank you both. And two things jump out at me from what you said. When I think about our coverage of professional services and IT services and the quarterly reports that we do, we always include a look at acquisitions. We always include a look at partnering. And so while those things are easily measurable and some things that we've looked at consistently, and we have a solid track record and a database we can go back and look at, when we get towards the end of 2020, I wonder how much is going to be different because of what we're going through now. And acquisitions, I think, and Elitsa, you mentioned security and cloud. I think that's exactly the right spot to track very closely to see who has the confidence in their own financial performance, their own balance sheet, their own pipeline, that they can go out and make those kind of acquisitions. And then when it comes to partnering, Boz, I think it's really going to be about who can determine what are the better metrics to really measure the meaningfulness of a partnership. I think when we're all working remote and when we're all sort of fumbling our way through this post-pandemic economy, I think being able to more clearly identify what's the meaningfulness, what's the real impact from a partnership is going to be important. So this was very, very helpful. It's good to put all these ideas out on the table, these roundtables that we're doing, and talk about what's coming next. And so if you have questions, you're listening to this, you can reach out to any one of us. You can also hear my colleagues Ezra and Jeff and Alan talking about cloud, data center, and devices in the previous roundtables, and my colleagues Brian and John talking about IT services in the U.S. federal sector, U.S. public sector. And so we'll be doing more of these, so stay tuned for the rest. And thank you again, Elitsa and Boz.